Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of What's Next Life After Sports. Super exciting episode today. I've got Jackson Hogan joining me all the way from the beautiful state of California out by Tahoe. He's got some pretty scenic backgrounds we can't see right now just because of the rain, but I'm sure he may move during the episode and show us if the rain slows down. But yeah, Jackson, super excited to have you on the pod, man. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's an honor. I made that podcast with my brother, and you reached out, and I was really excited to do this. So this is a great opportunity. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited about this one. So a little bit of background: Jackson is an ultra marathon runner, which is super fascinating. He's also got his own entrepreneurial side that we're gonna dig into today and talk about. He's got a pretty good following on Instagram, and then it looks like a little bit on YouTube as well. But we'll sort of have you plug what's going on there. Big athlete mindset, and just general principles for life. So, super cool page. Highly recommend checking it out. We'll plug it below in the description afterwards. But yeah, let's dig in. Jackson, welcome to the pod, man. Let's get the skinny on you. So, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to college? Sort of talk me through how you got into marathon running, and we'll sort of go from there.
Yeah. So originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Love it there. Born and raised. Then once I got out of high school, went to Valparaiso University. For those of you who don't know, it's kind of close to Notre Dame. Um, and so the reason that I went there, my mother went there, and I also loved the smaller school environment. Very keen on learning, especially since my career path, I wanted to be an engineer. Um, and so kind of throughout college, I played ultimate frisbee, since I didn't really have college aspirations for baseball or soccer. So I played that. I really committed myself to it. Had a great time. Made some pretty good runs in the competitive season. But then kind of transitioning over to that, I didn't really see too much of a future in ultimate. Not too much money in ultimate frisbee, unfortunately, even though it is very fun.
It is
But
fun to play.
yeah, it is. It's a great time. But yeah, kind of my people ask me, they're like, "Why did you kind of switch?" Right? And so, like, why? Like, how do you go from ultimate frisbee to ultra marathon running? And so, I think a big part of it was kind of the injury that I endured my junior year playing ultimate. So I had a huge injury with my wrist. So I had a distal radius fracture. And so that kind of took me out of the game. And that was right before our conference championship. And so, um, I'd kind of lost some hope in my life because, I was really keen on, wanting to play after college and maybe even, go pro for ultimate. And so once I mean, the doctors had told me, like, "You're not gonna, use your hand to throw again." And so I kind of said, like, "That's impossible." And I literally just I started using my other hand. I started using my left hand to throw. Um, and once I got my right hand back to full speed, um, I was able to throw ambidextrously. And so I think once I kind of went through that experience and it really showed myself, like, what I'm capable of, I was like, I want more of that. I wanna see like, how far my capability can take me in life, right? How far I can push myself. Um, and through my senior year of college, Frisbee went great. I was playing great. We went pretty far. Um, but I wanted more from life, right? And so I'd kind of always known about ultra running, right? And people talk about David Goggins all the time, and all those guys who go through those crazy races. And I kind of saw that, and I'm like, I want to do that. Like that sounds so cool. And people are like, well, you don't realize the amount of pain. And I'm like, well, you know, I've gone through a pretty painful part of my life where I was told that you're never going to be able to do something again, and I literally, proved the opposite. So, um, after college, kind of at the end of college, I started getting into running, and obviously Ultimate's a lot of running, but I started getting in just pure running, hybrid training, so lots of lifting, running, putting in, 30 to 50-mile weeks. And so I loved it. And part of the reason that I loved running so much, because I feel like people hate running. A lot of people do not like running. um, but for me, I found it when I started training. It's a way for you to get comfortable with your mind, right? Because generally, most of the time when I train, I don't listen to music. And when you don't listen to music, you don't really have any external sources of distraction, right? And it's just you in that kind of mental lab is a good way to put it. You're in that mental lab and you have to get comfortable with the darkest parts of your mind. And so I used running as a way to channel my pain, right, in life and things I've gone through, like my injury, um, some of the relationship problems I had, and that kind of thing, right? And so that's kind of my main motivation and kind of how I switched from, you know, ultimate frisbee, um, to ultra running. And so earlier this week, I did a 26.2, went great. And in October, I have a 50 miler. Not sure where I'm going to do that, but starting to get a training plan. But I'm really excited. So that's kind of like my main, I guess, modus operandi for my ultra running.
Dude, that's awesome. That's a really cool story. Unfortunate about the hand, but it sounds like it's led you to a really cool place now. So that's awesome. All right, just taking a step back for us, for a lot of us who probably don't know what constitutes or counts as an ultra marathon, or ultra running. What makes it different from running a marathon? Talk to me about sort of the fine nature that is.
Yeah, so typically, you know, people will run marathons, right? They'll run Chicago marathons, they'll run their city marathons. Those are usually pretty flat, and it's just kind of a continuous race generally, and it's 26.2 miles. Um, and so the main distinction is, and people highly debate this in the ultra community, but in my opinion, I would say anything past like 30 miles is considered an ultra. And another thing that makes ultras a lot harder is you are typically a lot of them take place in higher terrain areas and areas with trails. So a lot of it's trail running. So it's a completely different game. You're not on a street, you're on, trails up in the mountains or up in, the hills and whatnot. And the elevation's changing a lot. And heart rate regulation is the big thing too. And so um, typically people will do lots of training that is specific to that ultra, right? Because there are tons of different ultras. They range from all the way from, I guess, technically by USA track and field standards. If it's a sanctioned event, it's 34 miles all the way up to like 300. And that's like, there's not many 300-mile races that exist, but yeah. And so your training is very specified. It's not just go out, run on a track and build your volume over a week, right? It's a lot more focused on what environment you're going to be in, right? So if you were going to be in a race where it's very hot, dry, and the temperature changes a lot, right? You're going to want to do a lot of vertical training, right? So a lot of elevation, a lot of hills, even hill sprints are great too. And then heat training. So that's a big thing too that people really miss out on, even in marathons too. Especially it's been really hot recently, but purposely putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation is, what makes ultras different with the training compared to just a normal 26.2. So instead of just running, outside with, and this is just like kind of like a smaller example. When it's hot outside, instead of running with like a tank top on, you put an extra layer on to get extra heat training. And so another thing that goes along with that is the nutrition, right? You have to be, if you're not feeling properly or recovering at all, it's kind of game over. So that's kind of like, I would say, one of the biggest distinctions between ultras and just kind of normal marathons.
Okay, awesome. Um, Totally curious. How long slash how many days does it take to run a 300?
So I have never, I haven't done a 300. That's kind of like the pinnacle for
Okay,
me. I think that's the pinnacle for I mean, that's like the max, like, even for very experienced runners, like, some people don't finish those races, but those are typically, like, 5 days, I would say.
okay,
So, 5 days. Oh, and, another thing I forgot to mention, so it's not continuous either.
okay.
It's very so every, I would say, and it depends on the race, like 18 to 26 miles, there are aid stations, sometimes shorter than that in between aid stations, but typically at the aid stations, you get carbs, you fuel up, and
Yep.
usually you have a crew with you. You have a crew with you. Some races don't allow crews, interestingly enough, but
Hmm.
yeah, you get food, hydrated, you rest for like 5-10 minutes, and then you get back out there. And I think the main challenge of an ultra isn't necessarily like the nutrition. Nutrition is important because you get behind on nutrition, hydration, you can really get in a bad spot. But the main thing is like you have to be able to deal with sleep deprivation. Like that's a huge thing, especially if you are someone who is trying to, you know, if you want a podium finish, right?
Mhm.
You might not sleep for a couple days, right? You might only nap a couple times. And so like,
Okay,
that's
okay,
one of the hardest parts of training, I would say. Not even the running, 20 plus miles during a training run, but learning how to deal with sleep deprivation is absolutely huge. So, yeah.
okay. So there's something I want to draw on there and tease out a little bit further, but the mindset aspect of this, you have a very entrepreneurial spirit. You've got a lot of stuff going on the side. I think your day job, you mentioned you're an engineer, you're an electrical engineer. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Cool. So, electrical engineer by day, ultra marathon runner by night, but also you've got your own sort of side business going on with mental mindset shifts and sort of guides. I want to talk a little bit about for you as an entrepreneur, a lot of the um, skills that makes a successful entrepreneur and how they sort of relate to running and ultra marathon running specifically.
Yeah, no, that's I think there are a lot of translatory things in life. And so, um, for me, you know, running, and it's been hard to get some, people to run the business and, get customers just because of the 9 to 5 and also the ultra running too. It's very difficult. I actually have been pivoting recently. I've been um creating a plan to open a gym, which has the same kind of, foundations. And so I just want to go over this a little bit because I kind of shifted a little bit from like the online coaching to more of an in-person thing. So recently I found leadership and discipline in the younger generation to be something that's lacking, right? And I see it in people who are my age too, right? Not just the younger generation, but my age group as well. And so, um, my main goal is to, open a gym where we can teach these younger kids, um, how to how to develop leadership and to how to create a system for discipline, through group fitness activities and through nutrition, and teaching them how to, create, a strong persona. Because I think, you know you you can't really have a strong body without a strong mind. I think both play together equally, but at the same time, I think you first need that foundational baseline for a strong mental psyche. And so, kind of translating that to the running side of things and more of the personal side, um, it if you don't know how to get comfortable with your mind, I kind of talked about this a little bit, but if you're not comfortable with your mind, then you really can't succeed because at the end of the day, most things in life aren't really physical, like the challenges we face. Some are, but when you don't know how to deal with those things internally, it doesn't matter how strong you are physically, right? So I think the mental aspect is huge in that regard. And for ultra running, it's the training part is it's hard, but at the same time, your mind goes way quicker than your body out there. Um, and so if you don't know how to be comfortable with your mind and you let the small voices win, that's what I like to say. If you let those insecure thoughts come through your head and tell you that you are not capable, you are not able to do this, then you will not do that, right? It creates a limiting belief in yourself, right? And if you know how to filter out the limiting belief that you are not, good enough, and you can filter that out, like you're going to be successful. And it's still going to hurt. And that's the thing is the running's still going to hurt. You're still going to come with challenges in life. Even my business, I'm going to run into problems. Things are going to change. I heard this quote from another ultra runner actually. His name's Andy Glazed, and he was saying, let me see if I can remember. You know, bite off more than you can chew, and then learn how to swallow it. Right. So,
Okay, I
and I,
like it.
yeah, yeah, it's awesome because I heard that and I'm like, whoa! Like I paused for a second. I had to like pause the video when he was talking. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like life really is like that.
It's so countercultural to what is said, though. It's
Yeah,
very much so take one bite at a time.
right,
Yeah,
right. And
it's
I
interesting.
think what he's yeah, exactly. And I think what he's trying to say is just like, life you're gonna have a lot in life sometimes and learning how to make the adjustment is the biggest thing, right? And I think in sports too, something doesn't go your way, especially, I played, baseball and soccer for the longest time, make an adjustment at the plate, on the field, that kind of thing. For frisbee, make an adjustment to the tactics. So yeah, I mean, things are very translatory in life. There's so many synonymous things that you can just apply in every aspect, whether it's business, personal, relational. Like it's crazy how much overlap there is. Yeah.
I agree, and I completely agree. I'm curious, why did you land on mindset coaching? Like, what was the thing that sparked it that you said, "This is what I wanna teach, and this is sort of the thing that I wanna know, I want to be my legacy." Why mindset coaching?
Yeah. So, and this is like a lot of people, and I think this is like countercultural, I guess. Because so I'll start from the beginning because there's a lot more context, I think, with this question for me personally. So my beginning of my senior year of college, I realized that, engineering is not this long-term thing for me. It's not something I want to do for the next 40 years. Because I'd already kind of been in a couple internships with the Navy and, other places. And I'm just like, I'm not very fond of the cubicle, lifestyle. And a lot of the times I'm, in my cube and half the times I'm not doing work. And so it's like if this is my life, right? What is this taking away from? And so for me, I had to answer that question, right? And that was part of like what my vocation is in life. So what my calling is. And I figured out that my calling is, to be a good brother, to be eventually a good husband, a good father, eventually, a good son, for my dad. Right. And it's like, okay, so how do I do those things? Right. So I'm kind of going step by step here. And so I was like, yeah, engineering, I think, is a good short term thing for me. I've worked the last 4 years for my degree, right? So I can't just throw that out the window. But a lot of people told me, they're like, Jackson, like, you don't want to do this for the rest of your life. Like, I thought you wanted to do this for the rest of your life. Like, you worked so hard for 4 years. And it's like, yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I can't be a good husband. I can't be a good son. I can't be a good father if I'm working overtime in a lab all day and at a cube all day, spending time away from my family. And so that's where I kind of really developed the idea for mindset coaching, because not only would, you know, trying to develop myself as an entrepreneur give me a little bit more freedom while, being able to spend time with my family. Um, so it really was something that allowed me to um change what I wanted in life. And so a big part of that is helping the youth, which I was talking about. Um because I see a lot of problems with our youth nowadays, especially in the US, but I mean, you could just say the world too. And so I thought the best way to do that is, coaching. It's a very simple thing to start. There's not like a heavy investment for online coaching, right? And there are kids and, people my age who are genuinely looking for that kind of help in their life. Because I think once we have this mindset shift as a society, especially in the younger generation, like, people will be more focused, they'll be more goal oriented, and I think they'll be more happy, honestly. And that was my main goal at the end of the day, is to help people, right? And so I have the belief that if you are genuine in trying to help people and trying to, create a drastic change in their life, they're going to be willing to, um, you know, pay that money to, see that change. Um, so that's kind of like my main motivation for like the whole mindset coaching and the gym I want to open.
Okay. I really like it. Did you have someone that was specifically impactful on you, or did you have a hero?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple people. Obviously,
Okay.
the most uh, prevalent person being my dad, because um, he's an audiologist, so he helps people with hearing aids and whatnot. And he used to work for somebody, right? He used to work for a doctor, was making less money. But then he kind of got away from that. He started his own business. And now he has two locations open in St. Louis. And so he's my main inspiration for that, because, he's the main role model in my life physically. Um, and he's kind of given me the tools I need to succeed in that regard with, work ethic. But I think another thing that's been very, um, impactful on me in another person has been, his name is Bedros Koulian. I don't know if you know him, but he has a podcast. He does like a podcast on masculinity, and, similar to Jocko Willink, in the fact that he kind of relates, life lessons to business and how to, be a successful entrepreneur, right? And so the things he says, right, obviously are very against what the culture says, but they're true. And so I think, if if we really want things to change, on a mindset level, right, you have to be truthful with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. And there are many other people too, especially in the ultra running community. There are a lot of people who have this amazing mindset. Obviously Goggins, huge. Everybody loves Goggins. Um, and then Cameron Haynes is a big one too, big inspiration in my life. And I listen to these guys and I listen to how they think, and it's like, people say that, that they're crazy, but at the end of the day, like, what they're saying is true. Like, you do have to be comfortable with yourself. You do have to, not make excuses in life if you really want what you said you were gonna go after, right? I think that's the biggest thing is being honest with yourself and learning how to attack each day one by one. So,
You referenced Goggins and Haynes and how much of an impact they've had on your life and the ultra community more broadly. Have you ever thought about what it'll be like when someone mentions Jackson Hogan and how much of an impact you've had on their life and what sort of legacy that'll leave behind?
yeah, it's funny you asked that. Because I watch their podcasts a lot, and I watch all these other podcasts that are kind of in the similar niche, and I always think like, oh, one day like my name will pop up on a podcast or something, and yeah, I think when that day comes, um, when my name gets mentioned, I want it to be, not because of, I'm just going out and doing these things, because specifically when I say things, I mean like these ultra races. Um, but every ultra runner has a different story, and it's really interesting. Like every single person you hear about in the ultra community has a very different story. And for me, it's about inspiring the younger generation, right? And I want, if someone were to mention me or bring up my name or talk about me, that's what I want them to talk about, is that, this guy is working to inspire, to help the younger generation so that they can see what's possible and that they can see that, you know, I I wouldn't consider myself a runner, right? I'm 205 pounds, I'm pretty lean, but I wouldn't say that's like the typical runner type, right? So, the fact that, you can come from any background and be an ultra runner, and you put in the work, like it shows people what's possible, right? And something I want to mention too, is so I have this little passion project I'm working on called Project Gateway, and so that's gonna be it's just gonna be me. My family's gonna be helping me out. They're gonna be crewing me. So it'll be next summer, and I'll be running from the Kansas Missouri border, kind of by Kansas City, and I'm gonna finish under the arch in downtown St. Louis on the Missouri Illinois border. So I want to run. No one's ever done that before, to my knowledge, and so I want to be kind of the first to run that distance. It's about 310 miles, um, but people tell me like, Jackson, like you're just doing this for clout. You're just doing this for fame, and I'm like, yeah, those things will naturally come. Like, people will talk about it, but the main motivation isn't for that. Because if you are like, let's just put this into perspective. Like, if you are running that far to just get people to talk about it, it seems a little bit shallow, right? For me, like I mentioned, it's about showing people what's possible and that you can come from any background, you can come from, any story, any situation, and you can achieve greatness. So that's kind of like my main motivation for that.
I can tell you from my seat, I definitely don't get the clout vibes. I 100% get the message of hope, and message that you can achieve anything you really put your mind to. It does sound an awful lot like ultra marathons, are a really good way to prove to yourself, that if you really do put your mind to something, you can come from any background, be of any shape and size, and work
Right.
towards a goal and achieve something
Yep.
really great. So that's awesome. All right. We talked a little bit earlier about translatable skills. So I want to get your top two most translatable skills from ultra marathon running to the entrepreneurial community.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I would say the biggest, I guess, a skill. Ooh. a big thing is so this is huge because I think people miss this. And obviously, I'm a very new entrepreneur, right? So I still have lots to learn, right? But I think the biggest thing, especially when you're training and doing a lot of volume with lifting and running, it can be a lot, is maintaining consistency. So I think consistency is huge. And so people kind of misidentify what that means. And so consistency is putting in, the work you said you were going to do on, a daily basis, right? And people will be like, "Oh, well, you train 6 out of the 7 days." Right? That's too much. And I'm like, for me it's not, right? But and a lot of people try to say that, "Oh yeah, consistency is only, it's going to do the work every day, but only," I'll just say it kind of like, half-assing it, right? Um and so I see people get in this mindset. And so if you are, working every day as an entrepreneur, right? But you're half-assing the attempt at whatever you're doing, if you're trying to work on some kind of workflow, or you're trying to create a revenue model or a different business model, or different funnels, right? You're really not going to get any value out of that, and you're not going to provide value, right? Because the main thing, especially I've seen this and I've learned this from many people. If you're not working hard to provide value as like the main motivation as an entrepreneur, then you will not, like, it'll be very hard to be successful, right? So consistency is huge. And
Okay.
then so I think I guess I talked about this a little bit earlier. So when you're training a lot of the times and you're doing this heavy volume, your body's going under a ton of stress. You're enduring a lot of fatigue most of the time, even if you recover good, right? And so you are going to feel tired and you're going to feel like things are not going your way every single day sometimes, right? And I think when I was developing my business idea for the gym or even the mindset coaching initially, right? I felt like, man, this I feel so tired. Like, why am I even wasting all this time? Right? Like, I'm not even getting time for myself. And so the main thing is you have to learn how to deal with that kind of pain, I guess. And it's a different kind of pain than when you're, physically training, right? But I believe, and then this is what I was talking about with the short that I made on Instagram, is that if you don't go through the pain, if you don't experience the pain of training, right? Doesn't matter how much recovery you're going to do. Um, you're not going to understand how to deal with life situations that kind of throw you off guard later down the road, right? And so I think, especially entrepreneurially, it's very prevalent, right? Things will happen that you will not expect. And so I think learning how to manage the pain and kind of embracing it to a certain extent, right? Not now, when I say that, people they get really upset because they're like, "Oh, well, you're not supposed to hurt yourself." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's not what I'm saying though." Right? What I'm saying is learn how to manage the pain, learn how to manage the stress of running a business, learn how to manage the stress of a relationship, learn how to manage the stress of your 9 to 5 if you're trying to do all these things. Because eventually, right, if you're someone who wants to be in a relationship, if you're someone who wants to become an entrepreneur in the future and wants to maintain their job and training, you're going to have to become pretty damn resilient, right? And so the only way to do that, at least from, an analogy standpoint, is to understand what a physical pain is like. And I think that's a very, very good measure of how you handle other things in the future.
I think those are really interesting points. I want to get your take on a couple of others. As you were talking, I was thinking about some other feedback points that I've gotten for important skills for entrepreneurship and translatable skills as well. One of them being time management. I think that's a really important one, and you've touched on that a fair bit. But an interesting one that I thought I'd like to get your take on is the ability to be very agile and to make intelligent and quick pivots. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think actually that's a perfect one. And it relates perfectly to those long endurance ultra events. Um, so like we said, like things aren't going to go your way sometimes, right? And the next step, kind of beyond that, is learning how to make the adjustment. I did talk about that a little bit earlier, but going a little deeper into it, um, if you can learn how to put yourself, this is for ultra running, and then I'll kind of relate it back. But if you can learn how to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and then maintain composure through those situations, and like you were kind of saying, making intelligent decisions, right? I think that's huge. And it's guaranteed that we make mistakes in life, right? But especially with ultra running, you have to have a plan, right? You have to have a plan before every race, right? You have to mark out your route. You have to plan your nutrition. You have to make sure you're training how you're going to run actually in the race, right? And so part of that is learning how to make competent and quick decisions, right? And I think that does take some work, especially in a, you know, as a young kind of entrepreneur. It, you know, I'm going to make mistakes, and there are going to be times where there's a decision that I thought I made the right call, and it ended up not being the right call, right? And so planning is a huge part of the um, focused decision making, that intelligent decision making. And so when you're out on the trail or out on the course, it's it's very easy to let your mind kind of succumb to those quick and easy dopamine hits and quick and easy solutions that aren't going to, benefit you long term, right? And I think part of making the right decision on the fly is understanding what your long term goal is, right? So, for example, if you're running out on the course wherever you are, um, and let's say you're low on water, right? And you're really thirsty, but you're like, let's say 10 miles away from the aid station, right? Not too bad. Um, saving that water is going to be huge, even though you could just drink the rest of the water in your pack now. It might, you might come into the aid station injured, right? Instead of rationing out the last kind of bit of water you have. So I think in business, it's the same thing, right? And in the entrepreneurial world, it's the same thing, right? If you're not planning and if you're not making, and you're going to be in disadvantageous positions, right? That's kind of why I mentioned the whole example with, being low on water, right? Sometimes you're going to be low on water in the real world, and you're going to have to learn how to kind of make do with what you have, right? And so I think that speaks really well for learning how to make competent decisions in a short amount of time.
So there's one other thing I want to touch on, and I think it's super important to being honestly pretty elite at anything you do. And that is the ability to find flow and find deep focus. I feel quite strongly that that is a skill that you can learn to put yourself in a really good position and optimize for being able to find flow and find focus. And the people that I have seen be able to achieve flow and focus on a more routine and more frequent basis, and even almost a scheduled basis throughout their day, they are exponentially more productive. But I want to get your take on
Right.
that.
Yeah, I can totally attest to that. So I think, we see athletes, and this is a great example because athletes are probably the best example of what true flow state looks like. And kind of, just feeling very productive. You know, we see this with, soccer players, especially just how they move through defenders, and just anything really, like a running back in football, juking out, all the linemen. But I think a big part of achieving that is learning how to cut out the distractions. So, and this doesn't mean like in game, right? Or while you're working towards your goals. It's the things that are external. So those things could include, spending too much time on social media, spending too much time, uh, playing video games, right? Spending too much time not investing in yourself, right? A big thing that I like to say is invest in your future, right? And if you are giving energy and time to things that are not contributing to that, you may still be able to work on things for your future. You may still be able to work on your business. You may still be able to train. And I've felt that way before, right? Especially in college, there's a lot more distractions. But kind of transitioning out of college, a big thing was like trying to filter out the noise, right? And I think that's a huge thing because people don't realize this, but it takes away a lot of time from what they truly want in life. Um, and so if you are giving energy to things that are not benefiting your future, that are not benefiting you, then your mind becomes really distracted. You become distracted, your work focus, your creativity decreases. And this is something I've experienced firsthand, right? And we're human, we make mistakes. So it's happened to everybody at some point. But if you can learn how to cut those out and spend time, maybe instead of, this is just a small example, but instead of, kind of scrolling on social media, things that are not really beneficial to your learning and your understanding of your goals, maybe you find something on social media that is, right? You find content that's catered towards that. And it's not going to give you everything, right? Because you can read a book on how to drive a boat, but you're not going to actually drive a boat and learn how to properly drive a boat until you just actually go and do it, right? So, learning how to cut those out, the things that are taking away from your life, taking away time and energy, um, it creates focus in your life because when you don't have to manage things that aren't important to you, then you have a lot more energy for those other things. And that's where you create the flow because then because your mind can only focus on a certain amount of things, right? It only has so much, mental energy, let's just say. Um, and if you use that mental energy towards things that are beneficial, you're going to achieve that flow state, right? And it takes a couple days, I would say, if you cut out all those distractions. Um, but once you achieve flow state, you're still going to run into problems, but you're going to be able to have conflict resolution very, very quickly with those problems. And you're going to learn how to just handle pretty much anything. Right. And that's, you see the athletes, they're just running through the other guys. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. So a little bit about what's going on in my career. At this point in my career, I get paid to make good decisions for clients, right? Like I've moved out of the analytical stage, the doing of the work stage a lot of the time. And a lot of the things that I do now is I make decisions and I have to make the right decisions. So I have had to create systems that effectively minimize the amount of decisions I have to make throughout the day. So when I do get a decision I have to make, I'm able to fully
Mhm.
focus and be present on that decision. And
Yeah.
I've found that throughout my career, and something I learned from baseball, but I found that throughout my career, there are these lingering subconscious decisions and distractions that take away from being able to really find flow and achieve full focus state. So, for example, I'm at the point now in my life that every day before I wrap up and turn off the computer, I set a to do list for the next morning of the top priority tasks. So that way, when I go to bed, I don't have to subconsciously mull on it and go, wow, what do I actually need to do tomorrow? So it doesn't take away from my energy store, that mental energy store that you were talking about. In the morning, I wake up, I have my clothes laid out, I pick them up, I go shower, I pick them up, I go. I have the same breakfast, I have the same drink in the morning. My wife and I and our dog take the same route in the morning for our walk. I try and leave at the same time to go to work. I try to minimize as many decisions that I have to make until I have to make a big decision. And then I try to achieve that flow state and set up almost a environment that is really easy to achieve flow state for me, so I am able to focus on that decision and make the right decision. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about what's going on in your world there, and sort of if you've been able to find routine or optimize for flow state.
Yeah. So I think routine is a huge part of it. Um, so creating creating those systems is huge, like you mentioned. You're laying out your clothes, the night before. You go on that walking route. So for me, as someone training for ultras and trying to open a gym, a big thing is obviously preparation, right? So, and it all starts with my 9 to 5, right? So how do I get prepared for my 9 to 5 so that I can then just go and focus on training, editing, all those things after I'm done with my day? So it starts with nutrition, right? Nutrition is the biggest thing, and it's the utmost importance. If you don't get to something at the end of the day, um, at least have your nutrition be consistent, right? Your nutrition, health, and recovery. So the night before, uh, I will typically make my breakfast. Greek yogurt, that kind of thing. I'll make my breakfast, make my lunch, have it packed up so I can get to work as soon as possible. Work my 8 hours, and then I can come home, and then my focus is completely on training, editing, working on my business, yada, 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 basically. And so that is the huge part of achieving flow state, especially in my life. Um, because I kind of realize like if I'm giving more time to my job outside of when my job is supposed to be worked, then it becomes a problem, right? Like I was saying, I'm giving time to things that aren't essential to my future, at least in the fact of, obviously monetarily, yes, like I need my job to, have money to eventually fund that. But what I mean is investing in my training and not falling short on my training because my daily non-negotiables is to obviously work my job, make sure my nutrition's covered, and then it's do the training I said I was going to do, right? Follow through the training plan, get the runs in, put the reps in, you know, focus on, increasing the weight on various lifts at the gym. Um, and then obviously with running goals, focusing on heart rate regulation, like that's huge. And then at the end of the day, being able to edit content, kind of look at what the weekend looks like so I can plan ahead. And typically, to make it a little easier on myself during the week, what I've been doing recently, because I wanted a more efficient workflow, is I batch film my content on Saturdays usually, because that's when I do my longer runs, heavier training sessions. And so typically
It's a
after
good
my
idea.
longer runs, like I'm very exhausted, right? So it's nice. So I can batch film everything I need to. And then on Sunday, I can spend, probably like 2 or 3 hours editing and then just schedule those posts for the week. And then I'm good to go. So it's all about creating a plan, following through the plan, and learning how to execute the plan, right? So, yeah.
I would agree with that entirely. So, Jackson, man, we're gonna wrap here in a second, but talk to me. What is next? You've got your big run, your 50 mile, I believe, on the horizon for later this year. What else is going on in your world? What are you striving towards outside of the gym? Sort of making the transition off of online coaching, but also where can people find you? I know we'll plug your stuff below, but yeah, man, talk to me a little bit about what's next.
Yeah, so yeah, I got the 50-mile race coming up. It's probably going to be, trail race, high elevation, so really excited for that. Um I'm really looking forward to it, and after that we're gonna be doing 100-mile, hopefully by maybe the end of this year, early next year. So that's kind of what's on the horizon for ultra running. Um, and then just in life right now, continuing to work hard and, push myself to see what I can do. Um, and so I'm on Instagram. So it's just JND underscore Jackson Hogan. Same thing on TikTok, and then YouTube, it's just Jackson Hogan. So yeah,
Dude, awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you jumping on today. This has been a really good podcast and super insightful. I didn't know anything about ultra marathons before this conversation, so thank you for teaching me.
yeah, of course.
And this is great, man. Thanks for talking about the entrepreneurial side of life. I think you're our first entrepreneur on the podcast, so thank you very much for sharing your wisdom there. Really looking forward to seeing more content that you put out there, man. I'll be following along and really appreciate you joining today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. It was a great one. Hoping to see you guys at the next one and have a great week.